When they called me into the 32nd floor conference room, I already knew what was coming. You don't spend 17 years building something from scratch without learning how to read the writing on the wall, even when it's written in polished HR language. Madison Clark, 45 years old, senior systems architect at NovaCore Solutions, and apparently obsolete. Ethan Walsh didn't even bother to look uncomfortable. Freshly minted CEO, 39 years old, all sharp suits and buzzwords from the latest McKinsey article. He slid the termination papers across the glass table like he was handing over a lunch bill. We need to realign the company's vision, Madison. Fresh perspectives, agility. His smile was thin, practiced. I said nothing. No point arguing when the decision was signed, sealed, and delivered days ago. Instead, I simply nodded once, packed my leather notebook and the photo of my niece off the credenza, and walked out, leaving behind 2 decades of sweat, late nights, and quiet victories no one would ever list on a quarterly report. No goodbye party, no thank you speech. Just a sterile email from HR later that afternoon. Effective immediately, your services are no longer required. But here's what Ethan didn't know. The beating heart of NovaCore, the proprietary database architecture that powered their flagship SaaS products, wasn't theirs. Not really. I had created the original algorithm 6 months before I even signed an employment contract. Developed it on my own laptop, in my own cramped Brooklyn apartment, fueled by ramen noodles and stubborn dreams. When NovaCore offered me a job, I licensed the algorithm to them, carefully, legally, but never transferred ownership. They got the engine. I kept the blueprints. As I rode the elevator down to the lobby for the last time, clutching a cardboard box full of broken memories, a strange sense of calm settled over me. They thought they were firing dead weight. In reality, they were severing their lifeline. Ethan wanted fresh perspectives? Good luck rebooting a system you don't even understand. I pushed through the revolving doors into the cold Manhattan air, and for the first time in years, I felt light. The first few days felt like free fall. No morning stand-ups, no endless email chains, no 2 a.m. server alerts yanking me out of sleep. Just silence. I half expected panic to set in. After all, NovaCore had been my life for 17 years. But instead, something strange happened. I started breathing easier. Sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of black coffee and a legal pad, I wrote 2 words across the top. What matters? It wasn't the office titles. It wasn't the stock options they'd dangled like carrots, only to devalue. After every merger, it wasn't even the shiny mission statements plastered on the walls. What mattered was the architecture I had crafted, the system that kept hospitals running, logistics firms moving, and thousands of lives quietly flowing through lines of my code every day. They hadn't just fired a senior architect. They'd ripped out the heart of their infrastructure and didn't even realize it was still beating outside their walls. The algorithm, my algorithm, wasn't just a program. It was intention woven into mathematics. Every redundancy, every encryption layer, every absurd contingency for server meltdowns. It all carried my fingerprint. And no consultant fresh out of Stanford was going to reverse engineer it in a week-long sprint session. On the 3rd night, my phone buzzed with a message from Lena, one of the database admins I had mentored since her first internship. We're trying to patch things, but nothing's stable without your guidance. We miss you. I stared at the screen, feeling something tighten in my chest. Not regret, but a fierce, stubborn pride. They didn't follow NovaCore. They followed me. Every schema I designed, every system review I demanded, every argument I picked with lazy developers, it wasn't to be a tyrant. It was because I believed. And now, sitting there with a blank legal pad and a mind finally unchained, I saw it clearly. They could strip me of a title, they could wipe my name from an org chart, but they couldn't erase what I had built, or the trust I had earned. Novacor thought they could replace Madison Clark with a cheaper, flashier model. They didn't realize I was the blueprint they couldn't replicate. I didn't storm social media. I didn't blast Novacor in some self-righteous LinkedIn post. No drama, no noise. Just strategy. The Monday after my quiet departure, I opened my laptop, sipped my coffee, and made a list of names. People I had met over the past 17 years. The kind you nod to across conference halls and toast with at terrible hotel. Bar mixers, CTOs, directors, startup founders, a few venture capitalists. The kind of people who, back when I wore Novacor's badge, would pull me aside and say, "If you ever want to build something different, call me." Now was the time. I started small, a handful of emails, simple and clean. "Hi, hope you're well. I'm currently exploring new opportunities and would love to reconnect." Nothing dramatic, no bitterness, just planting seeds. While I waited, I turned to the more delicate task, protecting what was mine. My external hard drives were meticulously organized, not with company secrets, but with my personal projects, my research, and most importantly, the original, time-stamped documentation of the algorithm I had developed before Novacor ever put their first paycheck in my hands. Copyrighted, notarized, ironclad. I scheduled a meeting with a tech IP attorney, a no-nonsense woman named Vanessa Chang, who smiled tightly when I laid everything out on her desk. "Smart," she said, flipping through the records. "Very smart. They can't touch you." "Will they try?" I asked. "Oh, absolutely," Vanessa smirked. "They'll realize soon enough what they lost. And they'll panic, but don't worry, you're bulletproof." I left her office lighter than I had in months. By the end of the week, responses trickled in. "When can we talk?" "Are you open to consulting?" "We've been hoping you'd be available someday." And in the back of my mind, I pictured Ethan, Walsh pacing his sleek glass office, already feeling the cracks forming beneath his designer shoes. He thought he'd cleared Deadwood. He didn't realize he'd ripped out the foundation. I wasn't angry anymore. I was patient, calculated. Let them come to me. It didn't take long. Barely 5 days after I walked out of Novacor's glass doors for the last time, the first cracks turned into gaping craters. I got the news through back channels, old friends, in the engineering department texting me screenshots of frantic Slack messages. Major outage. Client escalations. Anyone seen Madison's documentation? Yeah. Good luck finding it. On the 6th day, Ethan Walsh finally swallowed his pride. My phone buzzed around noon, a number I recognized but had long since deleted. I let it ring. Then, again, and again. Finally, a voicemail. "Madison, this is Ethan. We're experiencing some unexpected technical issues. We'd like to discuss a consulting arrangement. Top rates, of course. Please call me back urgently." I stared at the message for a long second, then laughed. It wasn't even anger anymore, just a deep, calm certainty that I would never step back into that building again. Not for any price. I forwarded the voicemail to Vanessa, my attorney, without replying. Within the hour, she crafted a beautiful, surgical email in response. "Ms. Clark is unavailable for consulting engagements with Novacor Solutions. Further inquiries may be directed to my office. We wish you success in resolving your internal challenges. Clean, professional. No room for negotiation." The next morning, another email arrived, this time offering a 6-month consulting contract with a premium retainer and executive advisory privileges. Translation: a blank check if I'd just come back and rescue them. Vanessa simply replied, "Ms. Clark has moved on to other ventures. No further contact is necessary." Meanwhile, word spread fast. Clients, big ones, the kind whose logos you plaster across pitch decks, started jumping ship. Novacor's customer service reps couldn't answer technical questions. Implementation teams stumbled without the processes I had handcrafted over years. The entire system was starting to rot from within because it had been designed for growth, not just maintenance, something Ethan and his consultants never understood. And as for me, I wasn't sitting at home gloating. I was sipping coffee across town, drafting plans for something bigger, something better. They thought firing me would erase my impact. Instead, they gave me the ultimate stage to prove just how irreplaceable I had always been. By the time Novacore's board started publicly panicking, I was already deep in conversations with Lydia Grant. Lydia wasn't just any CTO. She was the sharpest mind at heliograph technologies, the very competitor Novacore had always arrogantly dismissed. We met at a quiet coffee shop on the edge of the city, the kind of place with no Wi-Fi and bad lattes but guaranteed privacy. She slid a thin folder across the table without preamble. "We're ready if you are." Inside, a blueprint, a clean slate, an offer to lead the architecture of Heliograph's next-generation system, not patching up old mistakes, but building something entirely new, from the ground up. Full autonomy, real ownership, actual respect. I closed the folder carefully and met her eyes. "I'm not interested in rebuilding another cold machine," I said. Lydia smiled knowingly. "Neither are we." That one sentence sealed it. Over the next 3 months, we worked like people possessed, but not the desperate, grind-yourself-into-dust kind of work Novacore had demanded. This time, every decision was deliberate. Every line of code reflected the philosophy we shared. Systems are built for people, not for spreadsheets, not for quarterly earnings calls, for the real human beings who rely on them. I handpicked a team, not based on resumes filled with buzzwords, but on heart. Engineers who gave a damn. Project managers who actually listened. Support staff who treated clients like partners, not ticket numbers. We didn't chase flashy investors or splashy headlines. We focused on building a foundation so strong, so resilient, that no acquisition-hungry CEO could ever hollow it out again. The name we chose for our new platform said it all. Pulse. Because if your system doesn't have a heartbeat, if it doesn't truly connect people, then what's the point? And while Novacore stumbled, bled clients, and quietly tried to bury their mistakes, Heliograph was quietly positioning itself as the future. I wasn't seeking revenge anymore. I was building proof, undeniable, tangible proof, that what they threw away wasn't a liability. It was the very thing they had needed most. When we finally unveiled Pulse to the world, it wasn't through some million-dollar launch party or a flashy tech conference in Vegas. We hosted a small, live-streamed demo, raw, honest, and brutally real. No canned buzzwords, no rented influencers, just our team, showing exactly what we had built and why it mattered. Within 48 hours, Pulse was everywhere. Tech blogs, SaaS newsletters, community forums. Clients who had been burned by Novacore's endless outages were practically lining up at our door. We didn't even have enough onboarding staff to handle the flood at first. A good problem to have, as Lydia said with a rare laugh. Meanwhile, across town, Novacore was unraveling in real time. Their board fired Ethan Walsh 2 weeks after our launch, citing strategic misalignment in a terse press release. The real story leaked fast. Clients pulling multi-million-dollar contracts, data breaches caused by rushed patches, engineers resigning en masse. I didn't dance on his grave. I didn't need to. Ethan's fall wasn't a personal victory. It was the natural consequence of underestimating the wrong person. Industry journals started calling Pulse the gold standard for sustainable architecture. But what really hit me was when Wired ran a full profile on our team, and the headline wasn't about disruption or innovation or any of the usual tech nonsense. It simply read, "The company that remembered humans matter." I was invited to speak at panels. Clients personally requested to work with us. Universities cited Pulse in case studies about ethical system design. Every time I stood on a stage or answered an interview, I made sure they understood. This wasn't built from revenge. It was built from values that never should have been discarded in the first place. Novacor filed for bankruptcy 6 months later, quietly absorbed by a third-tier competitor no one cared about. Most of their leadership team scattered into obscurity. And me? I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't vindictive. I was exactly where I belonged, surrounded by people who believed in building things the right way. The emails started pouring in. Not long after Novacor officially folded, old colleagues, former executives, even board members who once barely acknowledged me in hallways now suddenly remembered my value. Promises of blank checks, advisory titles, private jets for meetings. Some offers were absurdly generous, the kind of numbers that once would have made me question my sanity for turning them down. But I didn't even flinch. Novacor wasn't my unfinished business. It was my past, a chapter already closed, with finality and peace. Instead, I turned my attention toward something bigger, something that could actually last. With Lydia's encouragement and Heliograph's backing, I launched the Aurora Foundation, a mentorship initiative for women in tech, especially those navigating industries that still, far too often, saw them as replaceable. Our mission was simple: teach them that what they build, their code, their systems, their ideas, matter. But more importantly, teach them that they matter. At our first kickoff event, I stood in front of a packed room filled with nervous, brilliant young faces and said the words I wish someone had told me 20 years ago. Sometimes you have to let everything fall apart before you can build something that's truly yours. The applause that followed wasn't polite. It was raw, earnest, like a room full of people realizing they didn't need anyone else's permission to rise. That night, sitting alone in my office overlooking a city I used to feel crushed by, I realized I hadn't just survived betrayal. I had outgrown it, and that, more than any headline, contract, or salary offer, was the real victory. If you felt even a little bit inspired by Madison's journey, her resilience, her quiet strength, don't forget to like this story, subscribe for more powerful narratives, and share it with someone who might need a reminder. Your value isn't determined by who fails to see it. It's determined by who you choose to become after. See you in the next story.